Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel BNB Daily Spoiler. Forbidden Loves turns deadly. Sheila Vows to kill two people.
Taylor is promised by Deacon. Let's discuss what Deacon Sharp will promise Taylor Hayes as well. Steffi Forrester Finnegan will discover that Taylor is still not paying attention to Deacon Sharp during the week of February 2nd to 6th. Because of this, Steffi will go so far as to threaten to cut Taylor off from her family if she doesn't put an end to the mayhem. Soon after, Taylor will give Deacon updates, leaving them to wonder how they are supposed to move on from the love they have discovered. Taylor will make the same promise to Deacon that they will find a way to be together. Despite Steffi's objections, Taylor and Deacon will kiss once more in the interim. Deacon and Taylor won't be able to control their feelings for very long, even if they attempt to do so. When Steffi and Ridge finally get together, she will divulge concerning details about the man Taylor has fallen in love with. Ridge will agree with Steffi regarding the Sheila Sharp thread, and he will be shocked to learn that Taylor is in love with Deacon of all people. She must choose whether to grant Ivy Forrester's, Ashley Brewer, request to leave Los Angeles following her split from Dylan. Ivy will only keep quiet about what she witnessed at the beach house if Dylan moves out of town and never comes back. Dylan might end up lying to Will Spencer and Electra Forrester about a fake job offer from the other side of the nation. But soon after, Dylan will run into RJ Forrester, who might slightly dazzle him. Steffi was unable to get Dylan a job at Forrester Creations, but maybe RJ could win Ridge over with his charm. Since Dylan won't be leaving, maybe she can convince Ivy that having money and a house of her own won't bother her. Liam will be thrilled for both of them when he finds out that Eric is Katie Logan Spencer's new designer at Logan. Liam might also be worried about the Forrester response in the event that this secret is made public. Now that he is aware of Taylor and Deacon's relationship, Ridge's uncontrollable rage might resurface during the week of February 9th to 13th. Ridge would undoubtedly lash out at Deacon with all of his might and tell him to avoid Taylor forever. Additionally, Ridge might be harsh with Taylor and put pressure on her to continue with someone else. The risks will rise as more people become aware of Deacon's true connection to Taylor. If Taylor and Deacon continue their romance behind closed doors, how long will it take Sheila to realize they are in love? Lastly, it will be interesting to see how Dylan and RJ progress. Will Dylan and RJ fall in love, or will they band together to break up Will and Electra? There might be some sparks between RJ and Dylan as the BNB plot develops. According to spoilers for The Bold and The Beautiful, the next 2 weeks will be full of romantic surprises, so keep an eye out. After learning of Deacon and Taylor's romance on Bold and Beautiful, Sheila vowed to murder two people. Taylor Hayes and Deacon Sharp had reconnected, and Sheila could feel the old lights flare inside. She didn't love Taylor, far from it, but she recognized the structure of the crime. Her life had been impacted by Deacon's previous involvement in her social circle. In the past, he had broken up with Taylor, or rather, parts of them had split apart in a web of betrayal and forgiveness. Sheila perceived love that could be readily reciprocated as a provocation. Taylor and Deacon laughing together offended Sheila, as though the city was out to destroy her personal script. Sheila learned this at night, when the house was silent and the late-night noise on the television sounded like a soundtrack to personal scheming. From a neat distance of a parked car, she could see Taylor's hand nestled into Deacon's sleeve as they explored the Forrester estate gardens. It might have been any walk with friends. It was regarded as theft in Sheila's world. She felt the words like blades as she whispered, "Two people," into her clasped hand. There are two people. I can make things worse than a broken heart. Like intentions that simmer, the vow hit her like a stone thrown into a pond, and the ripples spread throughout the night. Sheila's first action was observation rather than violence. She was smart enough and old enough to realize that casual conversation leads to mistakes and enemies. She became familiar with Taylor's daily schedule, including the time she left the house in the morning to conduct her research, the route Deacon took to his preferred cafe, and a brief Thursday stop at the florist's. She saw the private places where people conceal their public identities, Parker homes and church basements. She was dangerous because of her attention to detail. She kept track of the time they spent apart. With the ravenous satisfaction of a woman who had turned craft into her religion, she found a list of weaknesses. Deacon's volunteer work at the shelter, Taylor's predictable Wednesday lecture, and a charity dinner where they would have to socialize. Sheila kept her sighting of them a secret. Those who anticipate mercy should confess. Sheila only anticipated a stage. Anyone who had seen her before would have recognized the way her plot came together. It was a series of well-planned, precise, and vicious moves. She imagined a confrontation in the rose garden of the Forster estate. Like a diamond, the image remained with her. She rehearsed her speech. She rehearsed the tone she would use if Taylor confronted her. She calculated how to ensure that the fallout would be total. No forgiveness that would lessen the drama of her rage, no tactful reconciliations. She learned from the world that nothing compares to spectacle. However, something shifted in the tiny lodges of her stomach as she began to carry out her plan. Sheila had seldom experienced regret in a constructive way, so it was hardly regret. Instead, it was the gradual restoration of a memory. Taylor's reassuring voice during the kind of crisis that leaves the rest of us weak, Deacon's hands on the night he vowed to be better. They might not be the ones who deserved brutality, Sheila thought in an odd self-doubt. This fleeting and unpleasant idea disappeared so quickly that she nearly thought it was a delusion. But Sheila's environment was not designed to encourage critical thought. Throughout her life, she had been physically and figuratively ejected from numerous rooms, and retaliation had always given her comfort. Under the pretense of a charitable donation, she arranged a meeting with a mutual acquaintance who still owed her a favor. The plan was simple. Taylor's reputation would be dragged into the mud long enough for Sheila to feel like the center of attention if there was enough of a rumor, a manufactured situation, and a whisper in the right ear. She would acquire power through scandal if the world refused to give it to her. Tiny flames appeared in the days that followed. A stolen email here, a conversation overheard there, the catastrophic appetite of a gossip column that ate like a wolf and smelled story. The first stings were an unpleasant question at a lecture, a derogatory remark in a chairman's office, and a social media video that was taken from the incorrect perspective. After years of trying to prove his metamorphosis, Deacon was once again scrutinized. For him, the new liturgy was symbolized by shame. He had become used to rising from the ashes of his own transgressions. Taylor's suffering was more profound, carved into an old wound that had once persuaded her that forgiveness needed boundaries. Sheila seemed to know what would happen next as she watched the chaos on the television in her apartment. She relished the icy satisfaction of power. She persuaded herself that the effort would end there, an emotional wound that would validate her. She was unable to completely stop. Once fury is ignited, it usually attracts more fury. She started to imagine the conclusion in the same way that a playwright imagines a curtain call. Dramatic, definitive, and unquestionable. "I'll make them pay," she muttered, her words now menacing rather than dramatic. "I'll make them understand the cost." There are many people in Los Angeles who have been deceived but have persevered. Hope, who had once been furious, and Ridge, who had lived his entire life trembling on the edge of public humiliation because his family's name required armor, were two of the most unlikely allies Taylor found. Ridge experienced a wave of fatherly fury upon seeing Taylor's name in a smear. "You stay away from Taylor if you know what's good for you," he said to Deacon in a tone that was difficult to misunderstand. Caught between his past and the fragile future he was trying to reconstruct, Deacon resisted. "I care about her," he said. "I'm not perfect, but I am not who you think I am. I'm trying to be better." Black and white morality was not the foundation of Ridge's steadfast rage. He saw the world as a tally of responsibilities, and anyone who put Taylor in danger, who had done nothing to merit media attention, would face consequences. In that atmosphere of distrust and protective menace, Sheila made the decision to escalate, not with a faint hint of scandal, but with a vow that shocked even her own habitual stoicism. As she sat in her apartment, a local news story about Taylor's speech at a charity fundraiser played on the television. Ridge stood like a hawk, Deacon sat in the back, and Taylor spoke. The scene looked normal for a short while. Then Sheila's mouth twisted. Two people, she whispered out loud, identifying them with such certainty that the room seemed smaller. Something indisputable grew inside her, and the fire in her chest felt like wildfire. She wanted to make their lives impossible, if not end them. She would be destroyed if there was no tenderness in the world. Even Sheila, though, feels that threats need to be carried out with some degree of realism. She was an orchestrator, not a violent madwoman who leaped without thinking. She considered a number of options, none of which seemed particularly desirable. She imagined seemingly predestined mishaps, such as a car breakdown at the worst possible moment or a fall down a stairway. She saw their life turning into a string of misfortunes, each small enough to be ambiguous but large enough to be tragic. Then she made contact with a character from her past who knew more about the city's underworld than she did, in one of those quiet, surprising turns that sometimes show up in human skulls. He had the appearance of someone who had committed terrible crimes and survived. He was a favor trader. Sheila's strategy involved using him because he offered the anonymity needed to make things seem like accidents, not because she intended to harm him. Rather, she saw him as a tool. In a cafe that smelled of burnt coffee and childhood dreams, Sheila met him. Their communication was a maze of money, threats, and mutual destruction, and they spoke softly. When a man asked Sheila what she wanted, she replied, "Make it look like an accident. Not a mess. Not evident. Just final." He gave his consent in the manner that people do when they have plausible deniability and are aware that they will be compensated. Sheila's plan came out of her mouth like silk. It was effective, brutal, and momentarily gratifying. Feeling like a general with sealed orders, she left the restaurant. Her pledge, which had started out as a personal spell, had developed into a tactic. Conversely, reality has an annoying tendency to be less theater-friendly than planned. On the night, they planned to perform. The evening of a fundraiser when both Taylor and Deacon would be away from home, Sheila's painstakingly planned scheme fell apart. A fictitious catalytic failure on Deacon's car and an alleged unintentional fall at the Forster guest house, where Taylor was supposed to speak later that evening, were the two separate incidents that she had orchestrated. The two events were meant to seem unconnected, like a terrible coincidence entwined with destiny. But the first plan didn't work out before it started. A former co-worker of Deacon's who had been surreptitiously watching Sheila's activities had noticed the man she'd hired, a scrappy presence of a person who lied for a living, earlier in a cafe. The person appeared to have a grudge over past wrongs. Suspicion erupted like steam. The inspector ordered an immediate sweep of the area, and a tip containing information that would deter criminals was sent to the police. The catalytic process was halted before it could be completed. The news took Sheila by surprise. Anger, which had been a slow burn, erupted into a fiery, blind rage. Her throat ached as she screamed into the receiver while calling the man. "You have failed me," she growled. "You'll die like everyone else who fails me." Shaken for the first time in his life, the man promised to put things right. In the world he lived in, promises were deals, and he vowed to exact revenge. The stair rail, the second plot, advanced. During the night, Sheila had made arrangements for a gloved hand to loosen the rail. The Forresters were informed of a near miss when they woke up on the morning of the fundraiser. A guest had slipped and flailed but was caught by staff. Though shaken, Taylor was unharmed. A vague smear of a figure in the night was all that was visible when the security tape was examined. It was sufficient to make headlines, but insufficient to make inferences. Sheila had neglected to take into consideration the human element that often brings down the most sinister plans: love. Deacon, who had been on the periphery of suspicion, had no intention of turning into the kind of man who waited for Taylor to wake up while standing watch in a hospital hallway. Both the town's distrust and Ridge's anger had been directed at him. He had, however, appeared to be present, reliable, imperfect, and sincere in the tiniest way that mattered. The mere sight of him caused several people's back hair to stand on end. Because of his presence, employees looked more closely and saw small details like footprints in the gravel and a misplaced screw on the rail. Like crumbs, little obsessions accumulate. The differences were found as a small piece of evidence by Detective Alvarez, a patient man who had seen far too many human tragedies. After grabbing the video and rewinding it, he found an angle where a glove appeared in the frame. Too neatly, too quickly. A neighbor who had seen the strange man at the cafe earlier and had a fuzzy memory of faces came forward as a witness, even though the fingerprints were missing. Law enforcement started to put the pieces together. Sheila, whose authority had previously been kept secret, became the focus of an investigation as word of the arrest spread like wildfire. She observed the man she had recruited being taken into custody, his arrogance giving way to entreaties. Sheila experienced the most bizarre feeling, a chill of terror. She didn't think the world would retaliate. There was no instant catharsis in the aftermath. There are far too many gray and disorganized things in Los Angeles. But those who cared about Taylor were motivated to act by the plot's failure. Ridge declared in public that any attempt at smearing should be investigated. He'll call friends. Steffi and Liam offered a shielding presence. Rattled to his core, Deacon sat on a bench outside the hospital and did something he had seldom done in the years he'd tried to start over. He prayed for the safety of the woman he cared about, not for forgiveness. Sheila felt her pledge fall apart as she watched the unraveling from the window of her apartment. In other respects, murdering two individuals was a pledge to use cruelty to obtain the truth. She briefly and terrifyingly considered the possibility of being stopped as a result of the failure. For a woman who yearned for control, that thought was horrible. The police investigation moved cautiously and slowly. Instead of collecting all the evidence at once, it was collected gradually. Sheila's hired man spoke until his voice was weak, and what he said made her movements, the diner, the phone calls, the white package, even more noticeable. Masks fell because of the city's need for drama. Sheila was not surprised when the investigators turned to face her. She looked like a woman who has been seen and found wanting when someone knocked on her door. The investigator whispered, "You have the right to remain silent," as a blessing. Sheila was waiting for something to happen to her, not for someone to happen to her, as evidenced by the way her eyes sparkled. She started, "You'll never understand. Because people like Sheila always require a concluding statement to support their moral calculations. They took what's mine." Detective Alvarez gave her the weary look of a man who had heard it before. "You can tell that to a judge," he said, his handcuffs shining. The wound Sheila had caused did not go away after her arrest. Knowing that her house had been suffocated and that what had been a private romance had been transformed into violence that could have killed her, Taylor's voice remained weak in public. Deacon vowed in front of friends and family that he would be the one to protect Taylor rather than harm her, as his attempts to demonstrate his transformation grew more pressing. The city muttered in the weeks that followed. Sheila was accused, and her schemes were revealed in court to be little more than a litany of complaints. The nature of protection and punishment, as well as the degree of mercy society ought to show someone like her, were topics of discussion. She was called a monster by some. Others provided comfort in the form of a terrible diagnosis, a mental illness, a life of abuse and trauma that had turned innumerable people into monsters. The courtroom became a stage for conflicting stories. For Taylor and Deacon, the end did not mean a return to normal. Trauma is a line that never goes away. They had experienced a near tragedy and a public humiliation that left scars. However, they discovered that they were knitting something they had never done before: careful trust. It was a patient, persistent thing rather than the wild abandon of romance. They found that love after violence is an expanded practice of patience and presence rather than the eradication of fear. In a letter to the police chief, Ridge suggested that frontline volunteers be given community resources in order to better protect those who were at risk. For victim advocates, Hope organized a fundraising event. The Forrester house felt special, its ivy scratched with headlines. Its rooms were still alive with conversation, but with a subtle tenderness. People who came to sit and listen, quiet dinners shared. Sheila's final moments lacked cinematic quality. There was no dramatic confession, no last-minute getaway. Rather, there was an indictment, a judge's gavel, and a short, private period during which she sat in a visitation room with a counselor who had been appointed by the jail. Like a metronome set to the beat of regret and defiance, Sheila's fingers pounded on the Formica tabletop. "You wanted them gone," the therapist whispered. "Why?" Sheila did not ask for forgiveness in her reply. It was a map of a mind that had been conditioned to cope with pain. "They hurt me," she said in a direct, almost juvenile manner. "I wasn't happy, but they were. There's no pure morality that can make things right. Both in real life and on soap operas, people heal in strange ways." Sheila's promise to kill 2 people turned into a warning about how resentment can turn into money and how easily vengeance can be confused with morality. While some advocated for therapy and subtlety, others wanted her imprisoned indefinitely. For Taylor, Deacon, Ridge, and the rest of the Forrester clan, however, what remained was a new form for their days: the silent, laborious task of caring for what remained after the storm. And Deacon discovered that protecting someone is an ongoing discipline rather than a one-time commitment, somewhere in the small acts that keep life together. As long as those who loved her were prepared to fight the small battles that shield a vulnerable heart, Taylor found that her life could be cherished in public while remaining private. While Los Angeles, eager for the next scene, carried on as usual, the couples who had been the targets of Sheila's wrath continued to walk the narrow path of trust together. Instead of retaliation, the arc ended with consequences. The town's communities, allegiances, and capacity for grace had all been put to the ultimate test by Sheila's vow to kill. In the aftermath, the Forrester house remained a site of sharp fashion and softer acts, the wardrobe of a family that learned, tragically, that some promises are better fulfilled than others, and that the true labor of living is healing the damage caused by the worst of us.